All right. Okay. Well, and so we meet again. And so we meet again here as time continues to do what it does, which is a great mystery to all of us. But in relation to this thing, this time and space continuum, which goes on flexing its muscles and coiling and uncoiling in the great void, offering us endless visions of phenomena, we are beholding a great vista, a great vista of our own unfoldment, the unfoldment of the unfoldment of the vision of our souls as we endeavor to behold the truth that is available to us, to our eyes, to the eyes of our soul and of our minds and of our psyches, to what is available to be seen. And what is available to be seen? Well, you could say that it is an endless stream of phenomenal imagery. It is a rising and a falling. It is an unpredictable flow. It is at the same time a rising and falling of imagery, but there is a source to it, which we sometimes discern. And that source is, well, an archetypal understanding of a vague kind of essence or a way of a primordial source which somehow is giving rise to all this that we see, which so beguiles and perplexes us. Mm-hmm. And so what this is that I'm doing now, and which you are participating with me in and helping me along, is an exercise in mythological thought. It is an exercise in mythological thought in order to come to reawaken our sense of the inner primordial ratios by which we organize experience and cognition. And we have helps along the way, coming from the great source of the literature of the past. And the ancient literature, both written and spoken, from all cultures and all civilizations, in all of their states of flourishing as well as decay, of balance as well as imbalance, in the rising and falling of the phenomenal manifestations of cultural thought, cultural expression, symbolic thought and symbolic expression. We are provided with a great number of workable elements of material and of meaning. Okay? So the string of 4 subjects, themes, which we are to explore this evening, were chosen not necessarily randomly, but chosen in the way that they are becoming familiar to me and the way that my own imagination is unfolding right now in this world. So the themes are dragons, dervishes, Ganesh, and Mulla Nasruddin. So let us continue to explore what that could actually mean to us. The dragon, or dragons, inexhaustible, impossible to explain it all. But one of the oldest and most primordial symbols presented to the human imagination is that of the dragon. And when did we first become aware of what a dragon is? What was the first moment when you first heard that word? Wasn't it always there somehow? At least that's how it seems to me, the dragon. And how did we come to know it? How did we come to understand it? There was the whiskers, the bulging eyes, the snout, the barbels, the scales, the coiling and the uncoiling, the claws perhaps, or maybe the fire breathing. Maybe it was that. Or maybe it was the guarding of treasure, Or maybe it was the streaking across the sky like a meteor. Or maybe it was something else, like something that you would glimpse from the corner of your eye as you would behold the ever-changing skyscape and the clouds and the streaks of light behind the clouds and the jagged bolts of lightning at times and the mists as they swirled. Do not these suggest to you the shape of dragons, writhing and coiling and twisting? Isn't it almost appropriate that, looking down at the ground and seeing the wriggling of the snake in the dust, that we could also look up in the exact same spot where we stand and see unfurling in the sky the shape of a dragon, like of a larger form of what we see at the ground at our feet? And what is common to them both, to both of these forms and shapes, to the snake at our feet and the dragon in the sky? What is common to them both? Why? It is the coiling and the uncoiling, the ever-shifting changes, the writhing, and also something slightly more immaterial, perhaps more abstract, and that would be the embodiment of a pure and unpredictable energy, an energy of life, an energy of instinctual activity. And so this could be part of the reason why dragons fascinate us, because of all the things that they remind us of. But let's take a further step into this. Let us consider what dragons come to represent in the lore of places and of place. Dragons seem, over the eons and the centuries, to bring to us an awareness of not only instinctual energies coiling and uncoiling, but also of weather and the changes of weather and the energies of weather and our need for the rain and our fear of the thunder and the lightning, but also of the flowing of what the weather brings us. When the rainstorm comes and bestows rain upon us and it lands upon the ground, it becomes the streams of water and the creeks and the rivers, which have their own kind of serpentine flow, their own twisting course. And even within the twisting course, there are swirls within swirls. The water itself flows along in an inscrutable way in these currents and swirls and eddies and waves. And this too is suggestive of the shape of the dragon. So it is no wonder that when the ancient poets, the seers, their vision enlarged, looking upon the phenomena of the natural world with a desire to explain it and to bring human consciousness in further contact with it, they resorted to the dragon as a metaphor. And as a metaphor, the dragon steps even more fully into the cultural and imaginative stream with which we are slowly coming to understand in our journey of human consciousness. So it could be like that. And let's consider a little bit now. There's two, like the dragon's tongue is forked. There are two prongs. On the one side, there are the Western dragons with the fire breathing and the treasure guarding. And on the other side, there are the perhaps more ancient dragons who guard the low places and the hidden places and the rocky places, the guardians of the ancient springs and the waterways and the underground sources of fructifying and life-giving water. And the connection of the dragons with human beings who come into contact with these primordial energies through ritual, through ancient ritual, through trance and music and dancing, where their consciousness changes and they become embodiments of the dragon spirit in order to relate to the rest of the people what the in undefined forces and powers want to be made known to us, and they do so in all of these symbolic ways. Well, I must also mention extreme states of mind, dire straits. For when we are telling stories, when we are dipping into the stream of human consciousness, again and again, we are faced with memorable conflicts and memorable dramas. It's our dramatic sense. Sometimes, as a storyteller, you want to ask yourself, at this moment, am I contributing to the dramatic understanding? The conflict, the mythic conflicts in human thought? Am I contributing to the dramatic understanding, or am I contributing to the poetic understanding? The poetic understanding, which is understandings which we don't yet have words for, right? The dramatic understandings have to do with conflict and all of this. The poetic understandings have to do with what is not yet born, with the unborn mind. And the figure of the dragon in its swirling and unswirling, twisting, not staying in any one shape at any one time is also an embodiment of this. Well, I must mention, though, after having talked about dragons a little bit, to get to the next theme of dervishes, of the dervish. Dervish is a word which can mean many things. One of the meanings it might have is that of a doorway, for in some interpretations of the word dervish, it does mean doorway. You might have heard of the Mevlevi dervishes, the spiritual descendants of the great Jalaluddin Rumi, the whirling dervishes, who, through a physical and spiritual discipline of dance and movement, could embody within their physical, mental, spiritual selves a single axis around which the energies of the universe would coalesce and twist, simply by spinning around in circles and not becoming dizzy. Or if becoming dizzy, embodying that dizziness in one's immediate perception. These kind of dervishes, who contained within themselves the spinning of the cosmos, the whirling of the spheres, but who also, as dervishes, as their discipline and as their work in a real world of cultural history and civilizations rising and falling, dervishes would go on long journeys, and they would go from place to place, and what they learned in one place they would carry to another place, and the experiences and their understanding of their experiences along the way would contribute to the changed senses of understanding that they would transmit to the places that they would come to in the course of their journeying. So journeyers, dervishes then, I'm offering to you this understanding. Dervishes are journeyers within their own sphere of their own whirling minds, and at the same time are journeyers through extended time and space. And they contribute what they contribute in that way, both dramatically and poetically. Combinations, in other words, combinations of understanding, which brings us to the third theme, loosely speaking, of Ganesh. Ganesh, a god. Ganesh, a composite god, a combination in his visualizable form of a human and an animal. Ganesh, the elephant-headed god, the god of writing, the god of wisdom, the god of the dance, of a certain kind of dance. Not the dance of his father Shiva, the dance that begins and ends the universes, the dance that grinds the particles of the universe, of the previous universe, beneath the relentless feet of the dancing god Shiva, who is also Lord of the dance. Shiva, Lord of the dance of the dissolution of the worlds. Ganesh, his son, is also the Lord of the dance, but it is the dance of the beginnings of the worlds. So Ganesh, in a certain sense, is a god of a gateway, too. Also, like dervishes, which means doorway, the god of a doorway. We'll explore that a little bit more. So Ganesh, the elephant-headed composite god. And then, of course, there is the further themes, which we will look at. But back to the dervishes. And back from the dervishes, back to the dragons. It so happens with the dragons that they put us in mind of the underground water, of the underground fructifying springs that we sometimes have to search for and sometimes cannot find, but seek and thou shalt find the hidden. So there was an individual who was named Bao, and he had an axe, and he was a woodcutter, and he was poor, and he worked hard going into the forests every morning and bringing home the wood for charcoal making or for stove burning or for house building, a woodcutter working hard. But then dire times came to his town and to the region. This was in ancient China. Dire times came in the form of disease and sickness, and at the same time drought came as well. The waters dried up. He would go into the forest to chop the wood, his mind full of the worries for his mother and his father and the people in his town who were afflicted with this disease which seemed to have no cure, which seemed to carry people away swiftly. It carried away so many of the people that he loved and knew, and made him feel so powerless. And it made him feel like a failure to care for those whom he could not protect. And when the drought came and the water dried up as well, the trouble got even worse, because the water, what water there was taken care of in unhealthy ways. With the springs dried up, with the rivers and the creeks dried up, what water there was came to be stored in runoff pools, and stored in runoff pools that were stagnant, and all kinds of debris and impurity were added to this water, and there wasn't anything that the people could do but draw the water that they needed to have despite the impurity of the source. And the water was controlled by unscrupulous people who would charge exorbitant amounts for a small amount of water, and it was just a troublesome thing. But Bao, in his excursions into the forest, with his axe over his shoulder, chopping wood, came into contact with other forces, other elements, other things in the forest. He came across, in the southern mountains, a hermitage. And in the hermitage, there lived a monk. And the monk had been peering out of his hideaway and watching Bao chopping the wood and gathering what water he could and grieving for his townspeople and for his relatives. And one day their paths crossed in the remote regions. And the monk said to Bao, I have seen you around. I've seen traces of your tracks and your doings and your deeds, and I know that you are worthy. Said the monk, I have lived here studying the ways of the plants, the ways of the mountain weather, the swirling dragons of the air, the writhing dragons of the ground, and I have come to an understanding of the forces that the dragons bring to the plants, and the different ways that different plants can help us, human beings, with our bodily maladies. Yes, I can help you by teaching you what I know of the lore of medicinal plants. This is how the humble woodcutter, Bao, became a student of this remote hermit monk who probably saw only a handful of people in his whole life. But he studied well, He worked hard chopping wood and bringing the wood home and gathering what water he could and helping the people in whatever way he could, at the same time learning the ways of the medicinal plants, so that within, a year or so of study, he was able to write prescriptions for the people in dire need, and he was able to help them in their bodily maladies, all because of what the monk had taught him. He learned everything that the monk had taught him, and he had access to the green things, the living verdure of the hills, and all the different ways that they could help people. And at the same time, it was never enough, because the suffering of the drought and the suffering of the various plagues and diseases always outpaced whatever he could do to bring succor and to bring ease and relief from suffering. And yet at the same time, his life had a purpose and a meaning and an orientation, which was to help people. And the situations would oftentimes present themselves in stark ways. As the time one morning when he was out gathering water, it is said that in order to avoid gathering water from the stagnant places where the water was stored, he would go miles and miles into the forest and find whatever rivers still had water in them and fill buckets and carry them, on sticks hoisted across his shoulders along with baskets of wood. And he would go far afield in gathering these things. And one morning, returning home, laden with water and wood and various plants, medicinal plants, he came across a prone form of an old man lying by the side of the road. The old man seemed to be living out his last moments. He seemed to be suffering greatly. But Bao set down his burdens. He kneeled by the man. He carefully observed him, and he realized that he did have a certain physic, a certain medicine that would be helpful to him. And so he reached into his things, and he took out a few sprigs of whatever kind of plant it was, and he placed them upon the old man's lips, and he even ground them up into a thimbleful of water, which he was able to administer to the man. And then he stepped back and allowed nature to take its course. And it wasn't long before the old man began to revive. And he began to get better. And he even sat up. And he looked at Bao and he said, You should have just let me die. And Bao said, I saw you suffering, and it is my duty to help you. And the old man said, Everyone I know has died. And for me, it would be a simple matter of closing my eyes and being carried away to the next world. But you have brought me back to this world of time and space. Ah, woe is me. And Bao said, Well, I can even help you in that situation, sir. Yes, I have brought you back into the world of time and space, but I myself am friendless and without family, as you are. So perhaps, old sir, if you adopt me, I will take care of you, and I will help you, and you will help me, and we will pool our resources together and make something of a life in this world of so much suffering. And so saying, the old man seemed accepting of this, and so that is how the old man moved into the home of Bao. And the old man continued to recover, and there seemed to be something strange about him. Something in the way he moved, something in the way he thought, something in the way his thoughts coiled and uncoiled. And sometimes Bao would wonder, is that old man really of this world or not? Well, Bao's questions were piked and made more vivid one day when the old man said to him, I know that it is so hard for you. The needs and the sufferings of the people outrun all the means that you have to help them. But there is a way. There is a way to bring relief from the drought, as well as curing for the sickness. It is all to be found in the pool of the black dragon. The pool of the black dragon, high up in the mountains. If you go to the pool of the black dragon and bring back several bucketfuls of that water, oh, there is no question that it will bring a great benefit to the people. But the way is perilous. There are tigers, there are wolves, there are bears, there are leopards up there. There are great dangers. Well, when Bao heard about the pool of the black dragon, he wondered if the old man knew something that he did not know, which of course he did. And Bao said, I will go there. I go into the woods every day and have gone into the woods every day since I was a child. You speak to me of tigers and leopards and bears and wolves. These are not things that I do not have familiarity with. So I should go up to the mountain in the directions that you give me, and I will find that pool of the black dragon, and I will bring back the healing waters from up there. And so the old man said to him, if you are willing to do so, I have this for you. The old man gave him a walking stick. It was a strange walking stick. It kind of had a wavering cast to it. The grain of the wood of this wooden walking stick seemed to swirl and flow in all of these different shapes. And there seemed to be, at the handle of it, it seemed to be like a carved head of a dragon. But was it carved that way and made to look that way on purpose, or was it just some kind of driftwood? That was something that Bao couldn't understand or see exactly. Couldn't really put his finger on the appeal that this walking stick had. But the old man handed it to him, his godfather now, his like adopted grandfather. The old man handed it to him and said, take this walking stick. It will help you as you go up the mountain to bring back the water from the pool of the black dragon. And so Bao set out to find the pool of the black dragon, according to perhaps the vague directions that the old man gave him. He went up into the mountains. Every morning he rose before the sun did, and every evening he did not lay down until the sun had already gone over the horizon. In a journey of about 3 long days, he found himself in a strange little pocket of ground on the upper slopes, seemingly halfway up the slope of the southern mountain. Now, the southern mountain was high and huge, and once you got up to the very top, the vistas were unbelievable. It was cloud territory. To go up there would to be among the cloud hidden, whereabouts unknown. But he was in the wilderness about halfway up the mountain when he came to a pond. It was a small pond, but a deep pond, and he wondered, could this be the black dragon pool that the old man speaks of? He walked around it. I think it is. Something about it conveys itself to me. Therefore, I will fill my bucket here. So he took his bucket, and he took the walking stick, the hook, not the hook necessarily, but the handle at the top of the walking stick. And he used it to hook the handle of the bucket, to lower it down into this strange, small, deep pool. And as he lowered it down, as the bucket touched the water, suddenly he was pulled down into the water with great force. He was pulled down into the water. And under the water, all he could do, plunging down, 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 was to hold on for dear life to this walking stick. It was his only thing to hang on to in this new plunging situation in which he found himself. He descended down through the water. He thought he was done for. He thought surely his life was over. He closed his eyes, and then he opened them, and he found himself before a castle with a vermilion gate, and many turrets, and windows, and towers, and walls beyond. And as he stood there, suddenly the door flew open, and a man in kingly raiment stood in the doorway and said, "Why have you come here?" And Bao was taken aback, as you or I might be, and he said, "I was reaching down to draw water from what I took to be the pool of the Black Dragon, and I was suddenly pulled down into here. Forgive my carelessness, O great Dragon King." For he knew he was talking to an actual Dragon King, even though the Dragon King was appearing to him in his human form. And yes, it was the Dragon King. It was the Dragon King of the Black Dragon Pool. And he said to him, "Oh, now I know who you are. You are Bao. You saved my brother's life. My brother, who is also a dragon like me, in his human form, was living the life of a mortal in the world, and was in an afflicted situation, and you came to him, and with your skill as a physician, you brought him back from the brink of death, and he was very, very grateful. So he sent a message to me by mysterious means, saying that you would soon be paying me a visit. So," said the Dragon King, "come into my castle." So Bao went into the castle of the Dragon King. And Bao said, "I came here for the water. I was told by your brother, my godfather adopted, that the water of the Black Dragon Pool would have the curative properties to make many people well and to bring moisture back to our land. And I don't want to waste any time in returning back to my people with this water. But there seems to be a different time scale in the world of the dragons." And the Dragon King said, "Oh, there's no rush. Stay for me for, the next 3 days. After 3 days, I myself will come to the land of time and space and to the land of the mortal people. But stay with me here for a while and enjoy some of the luxuries here in the Dragon Palace. And in due time, you will return to the world of the human beings, that mundane world." And so it was all Bao could do to endure the passage of 3 days or so. He wanted badly to return. He took no interest in all the magical luxuries that were available to him in the Dragon Palace. And the days seemed to pass both quickly and slowly. But finally, after 3 days, the Dragon King came to him and said, "Take hold of my cloak, and we will return to the world of the human beings." And then he took hold of the cloak of the Dragon King, and he closed his eyes. He felt himself moving very, very swiftly, and when he opened his eyes again, he was back in his home village. He was back in his home village, but he had several buckets full and heavy with the water from the pool of the Black Dragon. And he carried them to his home. When he got to his home, there was a poem written on the wall of his home. It was from his adopted godfather, who wrote on the walls of his home, "The kindest man in the world has been given the gift of the water of the Black Dragon. It will be used to heal the suffering of the people and to bring moisture and life-giving water back to the people in all the surrounding region." That was the writing on the wall. He didn't find or see his godfather after that. He inquired of some of the local folk, who told him that some 2 or 3 days before, a crane, a white crane, a bird, a long-legged bird, had flown down from the heaven world, landed on the stone bridge, and his godfather had climbed upon the back of this crane, and then the crane flew off into the sky. So it was in this way that Bao knew that his godfather, in his origination, was not from the world of the human beings. And he knew that the time had come for him to be taken back by a white crane. But he also knew that he had been given the knowledge of the water of the pool of the black dragon. He'd been given several bucketfuls of this water in order to bring it to the people and to help the people. So soon, out of their great need, the people came to Bao. And with his ladle and his bucket, he gave them freely of the water. And those who were sick were cured. And those who were healthy were made even more vigorous. And so it was a good and beneficial thing. But this story also comes to us from ancient China. And there were also governmental structures, social structures, that played a different kind of role in the unfolding of the stories that come out of that place. And the social structures sometimes were manifested corruption, human folly. And so in this situation, human moral folly was manifested when the local magistrate, a low-level functionary in terms of the great hierarchical bureaucracy of the empire at that time, and nevertheless, he was the sole authority in that region. And he heard about this mysterious water that was healing people and curing people. And this magistrate in his corrupt mind began to wonder, if I find out what the source of this water is, why, I could bring it to the emperor, and it would impress him, and my career would be assured. So he began to wonder about how he could get the source of this water and use it for his own gain, not for the good of the people. Well, there's a further detail about that water. And it so happened that Bao, on the last evening that he spent with the Dragon King, he shared a meal with the Dragon King. And the Dragon King told him everything, told him that, yes, you helped my brother, and I'm glad to entertain you here. I will soon release you to the world of the people, and you will have bucketfuls of the water. But is there something else that you want? After all, you saved my brother's life. Is there anything else that you might want? And Bao, perhaps emboldened by the knowledge that his godfather adopted was no ordinary person, he said, "Yes, sire, I would like to have that teapot that you are pouring water from now, that white jade teapot. I would like to have that. If you ask me what I want, that is what I want." And the Dragon King said, "I have jewels aplenty. Anything that you see here, ask, and you'll have it, of course. But you want this white jade teapot? It is an heirloom in my dragon family. It has been handed down from generation to generation among the dragons. It is precious to me. And yet, what good is a gift if it is not precious to the giver as well as to the receiver?" And so the Dragon King said, "All right then, I will give you this teapot of white jade." So Bao took the teapot of white jade, and that is what he carried back with him into the world of mortals. And he was able to give water to the people from the buckets, and he was also able to give water to the people from this teapot. And both of these waters, perhaps they were the same, but they both were of life-giving quality to the people. And eventually, the corrupt magistrate heard about the teapot, and he decided that he must have it at any cost. So he sent messengers to Bao, messengers from the magistrate, who came to Bao's door, knocked on the door, and Bao answered the door, and there was somebody from the magistrate who said, I am here to collect this teapot that my master has heard of. I would like to have it, and I have been told that if you do not give it voluntarily, I will take it. And I have the authority to do so, and I have the guards and the weapons. So in case matters come to that, we will be able to take this. And Bao knew what they were after, and he knew that it would not be good to give it to them. So Bao resorted to a stratagem. He said, the teapot you speak of, it's an heirloom of my family, but here, I will give it to you, knowing that if I don't give it to you, that you have the authority and the power to take it. And so he gave them a teapot, but not the teapot. Instead, he gave an old common brass teapot that he had on his shelf. And the magistrate's servant was none the wiser. He took the brass teapot, he held it in his hands, and he said, my master, the magistrate, must be foolish. This is just a simple brass teapot. Nevertheless, if this is what he wants, I will bring it to him. And so Bao was able to foist off this brass teapot, and but he knew that he was only buying time. He knew that the magistrate would come back for the real teapot, and so what Bao did was he took the real teapot, which, by the way, the real teapot, the magical teapot, you could tip it and pour it out, and it would never run dry. It would never run dry of its life-giving waters. So he filled many, many containers with water from this magical teapot. And then, knowing that the magistrate would be coming for it, it was only a matter of time, he went out into his yard and he buried the magic teapot under the ground so that it would not be found, so that he hoped it would not be found by people who were looking for it. And sometime later, the magistrate knew that the brass teapot was not the real teapot, and so he sent many, many messengers and many, many servants of the magistrate, and he ordered them to find this teapot. And he even himself went to the home of Bao, and in a threatening manner and a rude manner, the magistrate said, I am missing my teapot. Give it back to me now. And in a righteously insolent manner, Bao said, I am missing my teapot. I am looking for it. Do you know where it is? And in an imperious and brutal manner, the magistrate said, imprison him, thrash him. And Bao was taken into prison, and he was treated roughly. And it was demanded of him that he say where the magic white jade dragon teapot was, but Bao would never say where it was, no matter how much he was thrashed, or no matter how deeply he was thrown into prison cell after prison cell in ever more dire circumstances. And time passed, and Bao languished, and the servants of the magistrate dug in the ground, trying to find the magical teapot. Eventually, they did find it. The magistrate's servants. They were digging in the ground in so many places, and somewhere, not actually all that far down, about 3 feet down into the ground, they found the teapot. And they knew it could only be the magical teapot. And they wrestled with each other to be the first ones to claim it and to bring it to the magistrate and thereby gain the magistrate's favor. They wrestled with each other, they fought with each other, they pushed each other, and then at a certain point, I don't know how many pairs of hands grabbed at the teapot to wrench it out of the ground. But all these corrupt hands, grasping the teapot, trying to pull it and wrench it out of the ground, caused the teapot to grow roots, to sprout roots from itself, and extend further and further down into the ground all around. They kept pulling and pulling with great frenzy. And finally, something gave way. They pulled, But the teapot did not come loose in their hand. Instead, a great gushing of water came out of the ground and spewed up with such force that all of those grasping at the teapot were scattered far and wide. And it was like a fountain pouring out of the ground. And it was only a matter of moments before all around, the ground all around became moist and full, and all of the empty springs suddenly became full again. So that even now, this place is known as a place of many springs, and the water there is healing water, life-giving water. It was a gift of the Dragon King, who, in this story at least, did not appear in a scaly form. Instead, they appeared as human beings, fragmentary, but what they offered to human beings was the water, and it was the water that the human beings needed. And the story gives us an indication of the way the energy of the dragons can work sometimes. As for Bao, in his dungeon, eventually, a piece of chalk fell to the ground. Was it plaster from the ceiling? The story doesn't tell us, but a chunk of chalk or plaster or something fell to the floor of his cell. He picked it up. He looked at it, and then he walked over to the wall, the dungeon wall of his cell, and he drew a circle with this piece of chalk or plaster on the wall. It left a mark, a circular mark on the wall. And then he stepped back, and this circular mark became a doorway. It became a way to freedom. And Bao stepped through it and stepped into freedom. So, what that story is, it's a story of a dragon. It's a story of the ways that dragons communicate to people. And it's a way to consider something circular, something writhing, and something flowing. But in the rising and falling of the imagery that appears before us now, how are we to connect it with the next step in our thematic journey, with the theme of the dervish? Well, we could consider the ways of the dervish as the dervish wanders and journeys. There were 3 dervishes once, and they met together on a lonely road. We do not know where the road began and where the road would end, whether the road was straight or crooked. But it was a lonely road, and they met with each other on this road. One dervish was named Wayfarer. He was called Wayfarer because his respect for tradition compelled him to always take the long way, to always follow the exact directions of the route on the map whenever he went anywhere. He was called Wayfarer for that reason. The other dervish was called Save Time. He was called Save Time because, unlike Wayfarer, he always wanted to take the shortcut. He always wanted to save time everywhere he went, even though the things that he did to save time usually ended up making him take longer than they would have if he had not wanted to save time so obsessively. The third dervish was called Strangeness. He was called Strangeness because the things that he noticed and did seemed strange to other people, but not to him. These 3 dervishes, journeying together both within themselves and in the world, the extended world of time and space, they met on this lonely road, and they spoke together. And as they were speaking together and greeting each other, the wind blew. and a fragment of an old map blew across the road and came to rest before their feet. Wayfarer was the first one to pick it up. "Look at this old map," Wayfarer said. "Let me see what it says. Oh, this is a map of where we are right now. And there is a city here. And it is an ancient city with an ancient shrine. I must go to this city. I will go to this city now." So he went to this city, but because of his respect for tradition, he followed the road to the letter of the exact law of the road, and it took him a long way around, and the map did not tell him one thing. The map did not tell him that the city was no longer inhabited by people. And even though there was an ancient shrine there, and it was very worth visiting, it was a dangerous place to be because no people lived there anymore. Instead, the city was populated by lions, hungry lions. Alas, Wayfarer walked into the city looking for the shrine, expecting to find it in the accustomed way, but the lions fell upon him and devoured him. Alas, Wayfarer leaves our story here. As for Save Time looked at the map also, and Save Time decided that he may go to the shrine, but to do so would take too long if he followed the accustomed ways, and wanting to save time took a shortcut. This was in the desert, a lonely road in the desert. Save Time left the road in the desert and stepped into the deep sand. Save Time stepped into the deep sand, into the quicksand, dry quicksand. It didn't swallow him up. He didn't die. But every step that he took, he sank up to his waist, and he had to dig himself out with every step that he took. So he was stuck in this dry desert quicksand for months. As for the dervish called Strangeness, Strangeness looked at the map, and Strangeness said, "This is a good map. It's an ancient map. It's a beautiful map in its way. Look at all the winding roads writhing around on this map. There is an ancient city there, and I see the legends of the map indicate that there is a shrine there, and that's all fine and good, but I will leave this map to the wind. I will let the wind blow this map to other places, and I, Strangeness, I will seek out my fate as a dervish, wandering in the way that I wander, and seeking the meaning of strange signs, and I will go the way I go." So Strangeness, following strange signs that no one else would understand, eventually found himself walking down a desert road far from where he had first seen the map. But as he was walking along, suddenly he heard a voice cry out to him. The voice cried out, "Stop!" He looked up, and there was a hand in front of his face. And attached to the hand was a wrist. And attached to the wrist was an arm. Attached to the arm was a shoulder. Attached to the shoulder was a head. Attached to the head was the rest of the body. It was a person standing in front of him, saying, "Stop! Do not go farther on this road." And Strangeness said, "Why? Why should I not go farther on this road?" And the stranger said to him, "There is a house further on up there, and do not go there. It will be very, very dangerous for you. If you go to this house at night, there are animals there, the wild animals of the wilderness. And if you go there at night, they will fall upon you and devour you." And Strangeness said, "That's at night, yes?" And the person said to him, "Yes, the animals are there at night." And Strangeness asked, "What about the daytime? Where are the animals in the daytime?" And the person said, "Oh, in the daytime, the animals hunt. I suppose they're not there in the daytime." And so Strangeness said, "Okay, then, I will go there at night. I will go there in the daytime. I will go there in the daytime, and when night comes, I will hide myself in this house so that the animals will not find me." And the person said, "As you wish," and let him pass. So Strangeness continued on his way until he came to this house. He got there in the late afternoon. The shadows were long. The sun was low in the sky, but there was plenty of light. It was still daytime. Strangeness walked into this house. He found a place to hide under the table. There was old tablecloths, old rags and burlap, and he arranged the tablecloths and burlap all around him so that he would be hidden. He was hidden by the time that night came, and then from his hiding place he looked out, and he saw the animals arrive, led by the lion, their king. He saw all the animals troop into this house. He was there to hear every word that the animals said. And so it was that Strangeness, the dervish, he listened to the animals talking, and he heard secrets that animals know, but that humans do not. All except for Strangeness. At that moment, Strangeness was able to hear what the animals were talking about. And he heard several secrets. Strangeness heard, first of all, that in the walls of this very house there was a rat. It was a pack rat. And the pack rat had collected a great treasure. The pack rat had collected a treasure of gold coins. The pack rat collected them because they were shiny. And the pack rat loved to collect shiny things. It so happened that they were gold coins. They might as well have been of aluminum foil or something, but they were gold coins. And to the pack rat, they were something that the pack rat collected. Very valuable to human beings, something shiny; to a pack rat, something to collect. Strangeness, from his hiding place, he heard the animals speak of this pack rat and this treasure of gold coins. Strangeness also heard the animals talk about a nearby cavern. There was a hollow hill not far away, and that hollow hill was full of jewels of all kinds. The walls of this hollow hill, of this cavern, were gleaming and glistening jewels, but that humans didn't know about this, but that the animals did. The animals also talked about something that was going to happen in a village, a city, high up in the mountains, where the princess was going to be afflicted with a strange sickness, and no one would know how to cure her, except for the animals, who were talking about the way that they would cure the princess, if only they could. And it was that the princess could be cured by the hair of a sheepdog. The hair of a sheepdog that guarded a flock of sheep not far from that cavern. The animals spoke, and they said that if only the human beings knew that when the princess would become sick, all they had to do was show her the hairs of this sheepdog, and she would be cured. But the human beings did not know this. But Strangeness, listening, he heard about this, and he knew the things that the animals knew now, but that human beings did not know. So Strangeness, he kept on listening, and eventually it became dawn. And in the light of the morning, led by the lion, followed by the other animals, they all trooped out through the doorway. They streamed away into the wilderness. And Strangeness, he waited until they were all gone, and then he himself crept out from his hiding place. And Strangeness, he looked off in the distance to make sure that the animals were gone and that he would be safe. And then he sat in the middle of this house still, now empty, and he waited. He didn't have to wait long. Presently, he heard a scratching sound. He looked over toward the wall, and there was a hole in the wall, and inside the wall, there was the rat, the pack rat. He saw the pack rat's whiskered nose creep out of the hole. He saw the pack rat step out of its hole in the wall, grasping between its teeth a gold coin. He saw the pack rat go to the center of the room and drop the gold coin down in the center of the room. And he saw the pack rat go back to the hole in the wall, go inside the hole in the wall and take out another gold coin and bring it out to the center of the room and put it there. And he saw the pack rat go back and forth between its nest in the wall of this house and the middle of the room of this house until there was a nice pile of gold coins that the pack rat brought out, I guess, to look at or something. Only Strangeness was there. And Strangeness, he clapped his hands like that. And the pack rat scurried away. And Strangeness walked over to the pile of gold coins and said, "Oh, now I have something to carry with me. Some gold coins to keep with me as I continue on my journey." And so Strangeness the dervish, he put the gold coins into his satchel, and then he took leave of his house, and then he went over the hill to the meadow, and he walked around in the meadow. He walked toward a distant flock of sheep. As he walked toward the distant flock of sheep, he saw that there was a fine sheepdog sitting nearby, guarding his flock. Strangeness walked over to the sheepdog, and he began to pet it. And as he was petting the sheepdog, talking to the sheepdog, telling the sheepdog of his journey as Strangeness the dervish, Strangeness gently pulled 3 hairs from behind the ears of the sheepdog, 3 hairs of the sheepdog. And he thought to himself, this might be good for traveling with, and he put them in his satchel. And then he wandered a little bit more until he came to a hill, a hollow hill. He looked inside a hole between rocks into this cavern, into this hollow hill. He looked inside and he saw the glittering on the walls. As indeed, he had come to the cavern that the animals had been talking about. And indeed, it was a cavern whose walls were glittering jewels. Anyone else would have probably taken handfuls and handfuls of these precious jewels, but if they had done so, the walls would have fallen upon them, because it was the jewels that were holding up the walls of this hollow hill. And Strangeness felt no need to take any of the jewels. Instead, he enjoyed them by looking at them, at their shimmering in the half-light, half-darkness inside this hollow hill. He looked at it for a while, and then he continued on his way. Strangeness walked, and he walked, following strange signs. Perhaps I should tell you some of the signs that he followed, which were strange. For example, if he came to a crossroads, and he didn't know which way to go, he would spin in circles, and spin and spin and spin until he became dizzy and fell down. And whichever way he was facing when he got up, that is the direction he would go. Or if he saw a beautiful cloud going in one direction, he would follow the beautiful cloud. Or if a tree branch seemed to wave at him a certain way, as like a beckoning, he would go in that direction. So, following such strange signs, seemingly arbitrary, he soon found himself in a city in the mountains. And he noticed that all the people had a preoccupied air. They seemed sad. They seemed disturbed. And so finally, he asked an old woman, he asked her, "Excuse me, I am traveling. I'm Strangeness the dervish. I notice that the people in the city have a preoccupied air. They seem worried. They seem disturbed. Can you tell me, what's the problem here?" And the old woman said to him, "Alas, the princess of our city has become sick. She has taken to her bed and hardly moves at all, and does not respond much to the people around her. The king, in his worry, has become sick with anguish, sick in his mind. The king has offered great rewards for physicians to come from all over the world to try and cure the princess. And when they fail to do so, the king has them put to death in terrible ways." And so Strangeness said, I believe that I can help. Please show me the way to the palace, and I, Strangeness the dervish, will meet with the king and see if I can help. And so the old woman said to him, "You realize many have tried to cure the princess, and they have all failed and been put to death in terrible ways. You want to be among their number?" And Strangeness said, No, I'm not too worried about that. I think I will try my hand at helping. Please take me to the palace. And so she said, follow me. So Strangeness followed the old woman through the winding, curving streets of this town in the mountains until they came to the center of the town, and there was a castle there, and the old woman said, this is the castle of the king. I will take my leave now. Knock, and the door shall open. So she left. Strangeness approached the door, the great door of this palace. There was a heavy iron ring over the door. He took hold of it with his hands and let it fall against the wood. Gong, 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 3 times. The door then opened with a creaking sound. And on the other side of the door, there was a guard. The guard had a great handlebar mustache. And, oh, sad, sad eyes. And the guard, with his sad eyes and his handlebar mustache, was holding a halberd, a spear, a sharp spear, and it was pointing right at Strangeness's chest. And the guard said, why have you come here? And Strangeness said, O guard, I am Strangeness, a dervish. I have been traveling across the desert in various places. I have found mysterious objects which could be beneficial. Please, take me to the king, and I will try to cure the princess. And so the guard said, you realize many have tried. Many have failed. They've all been put to death in terrible ways. Nevertheless, come with me into the palace. I will take you to the king. And so Strangeness followed the guard through these curving and winding hallways of this palace until they came to a room in the exact center of the palace, which was in the exact center of the city. And in this room, the guard took his leave, and Strangeness was now before a great throne with a torch flickering on either side. And there, sitting on the throne with his head in his hands, was the king. And the king looked up, and his eyes were even sadder than the guard's. The king said, you, why have you come here? And Strangeness said, I am Strangeness, the dervish, following strange signs, not strange to me, but strange to other people. I have found myself here, and I believe, O king, that I can help the princess. Please take me to her, and I will see if I can help her. And the king said, if you succeed in curing her, you will have half of my kingdom now, and the rest when I die. If, on the other hand, you fail in curing her, I will stick you on top of a pointed minaret, and the crows will eat your eyes. And Strangeness said, I believe that I can help the princess, and I am willing to accept your terms, O king. Please, take me to the princess. And so the king said, come with me then. And so Strangeness followed the king to a room nearby where the princess lay on a bed. She was hardly responsive at all. Her eyes seemed to move behind her closed eyelids. She was breathing. If you placed a mirror before her nostrils, it would leave 2 misty smudges. So they knew that she was alive. Her heart was beating, but other than that, she was unresponsive. And Strangeness, he said, allow me a few moments with the princess. And he pulled up a chair, and he sat down by the bed, and he began to talk. Strangeness said, princess, I am Strangeness the dervish. I have been traveling around, and he actually ended up telling her of all his adventures about the house of the animals and the various things that he'd seen and found. And while he was talking, he was surreptitiously arranging the hairs of the sheepdog behind his fingers. And when all 3 hairs of the sheepdog were in between each of his fingers, suddenly he brought his hand away from his other hand and said, look! He said it like that. Look! Just like that. And the sudden sound of the word look caused the princess to open her eyes for just a moment. And she saw the hairs of the sheepdog in Strangeness's hands. And that was all it took. It was like a shock of health flashed through her. And she opened her eyes and she lifted up her head and said, who are you? And Strangeness said, don't you know? I am Strangeness the dervish. I already told you this. Behold the hairs of the sheepdog. You are getting better now, aren't you? And yes, indeed, she was getting better. In a few short moments, she was able to sit up in bed. She asked for soup to eat, and Strangeness called for soup to be brought. And when the soup was brought, the king came in, and the king was overjoyed to see his daughter conscious and well once more. He was so overjoyed that his own madness left him. He himself was cured of his need for vengeance against those who had failed to cure his daughter, and he kept his promise to Strangeness. As his daughter continued to recover, why, the king gave over to Strangeness half of his kingdom, which was a considerable amount, and included in that a promise of inheriting the rest of the kingdom when the king died. So now Strangeness, he was a wealthy man, but it didn't change him at all. He was still Strangeness. He was still a dervish. He still went around and did and noticed strange things, strange to other people, but not to him. He moved into a little shack out on the edge of town, and he would go about in the city wearing a disguise, a different disguise each day. He was interested in the way that people treated him based upon the disguises that he was wearing. And in this way, he was studying human nature. And a few months passed. He was walking around in a disguise one day. He came to the town square, and there was someone in the town square that he recognized, someone covered with sand, who was talking very rapidly, as if he did not want to waste any time. It was Save Time. Save Time had dug himself out of the quicksand in which he was stuck for months, and now he was in the city too. And he happened to see Strangeness, but he didn't exactly recognize Strangeness, but Strangeness recognized Save Time. And Strangeness said, "You there, I remember you. Here, come to my little shack at the edge of town. I will give you some bread and some cheese and some tea, and we will relate to each other our adventures since the last time that we saw each other." And so Save Time accompanied Strangeness to his little shack, and Save Time sat down, and he was served tea and cheese and bread by Strangeness. And after a time, Save Time remembered who Strangeness was. He said to him, You are Strangeness. You were that dervish who was strange and weird and noticed weird things. Well, I am Save Time." And Strangeness said, "Yes, I remember you very well." And Save Time tell me, Strangeness, how have things gone with you since we last met? And so Strangeness told Save Time everything that happened. Told him about the house full of the animals, about the pack rat, the gold coins, the cavern of jewels, the sheepdog, the hair of the sheepdog, all of these different things. But he could tell that Save Time was still obsessed with saving time so much that it kept him from being able to really listen. And as soon as Save Time heard about the house full of the animals, he wanted to go there. Because he said to Strangeness, "Oh, you came to a house of animals and you found all that gold? Ooh, I want to go there too. Please tell me how to get there." And Strangeness said to him, "Now, Save Time, I do not think that is indicated. I think instead that what you should do is stay here with me and study the manifestations of time, because it is important to learn about strange signs and how to follow them in order to unfold your destiny. It is more important to do that than to save time as you conceive of saving time." But Save Time didn't want to hear any of that. He thought it would be a waste of time. So he said, "No, just tell me where the house of animals is." And so Strangeness told him where the house of animals was. But he said to him, "Now, Strangeness, I warn you, do not go there at night. It is not safe. They will eat you. Go there in the daytime, hide yourself like I did, and when night comes, then you will be safe, and you will be able to hear whatever you will hear." Well, Save Time listened to this, but it didn't stay in his mind very long. He was in such a haste to get to the house of animals to find out his fate that he arrived. It was nighttime. He paused a moment, wondering if he should wait a moment before going in, but he went in anyway, not wanting to waste any time. And the animals were all there, and they fell upon poor Save Time, and they ate him up. That was the end of Save Time. As for Strangeness, staying in his shack, one day he was visited by the princess, who came to him and expressed her appreciation for making her well. And she desired to get to know him better, and they became friends. And eventually they were married, and they became the king and the queen of that land. And they live there to this day, and they rule that land very, very wisely, Strangeness and the princess. So this is a dervish tale, a strange dervish tale. Dervishes, doorways, who journey within themselves and also extended into the worlds of time and space. The dervishes, the dragons, the dervishes, Ganesh, the composite god, the god of the doorway. Ganesh, who is the son of Shiva and Parvati. Shiva, the god of destruction, the lord of the dance, whose dance dissolved the previous world so that the dance of Ganesh, his son, can make a new world begin again. Now Shiva is also a god of meditation. Shiva goes into the mountains, and what he loves more than anything else is undisturbed time to meditate. And Shiva wears around his neck snakes. Snakes as adornments, snakes as necklaces, snakes who are a kind of dragon, at least in the way that we are coming to understand it now in this reverie that we are participating in. Snakes are dragons writhing around, and they are soothed by being around the neck of the god Shiva. The heartbeat of Shiva, the god, calms them, and they love to be around the neck of Shiva. They also love to be at the places where Shiva goes. Shiva seeks the mountain heights as a place to meditate. And even though it's cold up there and sublimely hostile to human habitation, Shiva, as a barefoot god, dressed only in a tiger skin with snakes around his neck, he loves to go to these remote places and sit down on the jagged rocks, and there he loves to meditate. And the snakes love it up there too, because the snakes are in an alpine atmosphere. And that is significant. Let us consider that for a moment. The snakes are above the warm places. The snakes then, in a certain sense, are in places where their energies are cooled and subdued and nourished and held by the energies of Shiva, the god, but also they're in an environment where they are not, their destructive tendencies are not called forth. And as a matter of fact, a slight digression, there is a tale that Rumi, the dervish, used to tell of a man who went into the mountain heights and came across a hibernating snake. It was a large snake, perhaps it was even a dragon. He was in the heights of the mountains where it was cold, and he lifted the snake up in his arms, and he said, "This is something that people in the lowlands would love to see. If I carry this creature down into the lowlands, the people will pay me money to see this dragon, this monster, this snake that I have brought from the heights, and they will glorify me as the master of this snake." And so he picked up the snake. The snake seemed very, very docile, almost like it wasn't even alive. Well, you know and I know that the snake was hibernating because it was in the mountains. And it was cold up there, and that's what snakes do. And the man carried the snake down from the heights, down into the city. He set up a display. He laid it out so that all the people would come. He charged them admission. "Come see the snake. I, the snake master, discovered the snake in the mountain heights. Come and see it. Oh, people, see the snake that I have found. Oh, but after a time, the warmth of the lowlands caused the snake to wake up. Presently, the people around, they heard the heartbeat of the snake, and the heartbeat began to quicken, and the snake began to move and writhe, and it lifted up its head, and then it began to go after the people. It began to chase after the people. The people streamed away. They tried to escape. The man who had found, according to Rumi, is the story that he tells, the man who found the snake tried to hide behind a pillar to escape from the snake, but the snake wound around the pillar and crushed the pillar and the man as well, and that was the end of the man. Rumi tells us that this is what happens when we find the snake of our animal soul, the snake of our untamed soul, our nafs, our animal energies. And when they are found in the heights, in the ascetic places, in the places where we are detached from them and we have a detached understanding of these energies, then they are in their place, and that is good. But when we warm them up with our desire energies, with our desire perhaps for, glorification or fame or gain of some kind, then they become strong, and their instinctive energies reawaken, and then they become dangerous. So this is a dervish way of understanding dragons as exemplified by Rumi. And it is echoed in a certain sense when we consider the snakes that live around the neck of Shiva, the god of meditation, and the mountain places that Shiva inhabits. Well, Shiva married the goddess of nature, the goddess of form, Parvati. Shiva is the god of formlessness. Parvati is the goddess of nature, of form. Parvati said to Shiva one day, Shiva, it is all right with me if you go off into the mountains, and you can meditate there all you wish. I, myself, as the goddess of form, I will make this place, this shack where we live, I will make it into a more beautiful home for us. And so Shiva was glad to have permission to go off into the mountains to meditate, and so he did. Parvati, she painted the walls, she wove carpets for the floor, she made curtains for the windows. She went out into the garden, into the earth around the house, and she breathed upon the soil, and plants grew. And this way she made a garden. Parvati made a sun for herself. She mixed water from her bath. She poured it on the ground. She shaped of the clay of the ground a sun. She breathed upon him, and he came to life. And she named him Ganesh. He looked like a human being, though he was a god, part Shiva and part Parvati. He helped his mother every day. And even though his father was gone off in the mountains and he'd never laid eyes on his father, Parvati would tell him about his father Shiva. Oh yes, Ganesh, your father Shiva is the god of meditation. He's off in the mountains now, living in his detached way. Someday you will meet him, and he is a wonderful god, and someday you will see him. But one day, Ganesh, who had not yet seen his father, was helping his mother Parvati, and his mother Parvati said to her son Ganesh, Ganesh, I'm going to take a bath. I don't want to be disturbed. I'm going to close the door, and I want to be by myself for a while. I would like you to guard the doorway, and anyone who comes to visit, tell them to go away. And Ganesh was eager to help his mother, and so he said, okay, mother, I will guard the doorway, and I will tell anyone approaching to mind their own business and to go away. It just so happened that this was the very day that Shiva, who had been meditating for thousands of years, for time is different for a god than for human beings, he ended his meditation. He opened up his eyes. He sat up and he said, oh, I must return home to my wife Parvati. I haven't seen her in a long time. And so Shiva began his return home. He was approaching his home. He noticed from a distance the curtains and the flowers outside and the vines and the creepers covering the wall. He approached his doorway, and there was a child standing in the doorway, standing in front of him, blocking his way, saying, don't take another step, you. And Shiva looked down, and Shiva beheld his own son Ganesh, but he didn't know who it was. Ganesh beheld his father Shiva, but he didn't know it was his father Shiva. They were strangers facing each other. And Ganesh said, "You, go away, strange vagabond. My mother gives me strict instructions to keep everyone away from this door." And Shiva said, "You, child, get out of my way." And Ganesh said, "No, I will not get out of your way. You go away." And Shiva began to get angry. "Get out of my way, I warn you." And Shiva has a third eye. You might know about it. Shiva's third eye is the eye of destruction. When that eye opens, a great beam of light comes out and nothing can stand in its way. It's like a bolt of lightning, more powerful than that. And Shiva began to get angry. His third eye began to wrinkle. And Shiva said, "I'm warning you, get out of my way." And Ganesh said, "I'm warning you, you go away." And so finally Shiva lost his temper. His third eye opened. And where Ganesh's head had been, there was now nothing. Shiva's bolt of light from his third eye had completely removed Ganesh's head. Parvati, inside, she heard the commotion. She rushed outside and she saw Ganesh there, headless. And she said, "Shiva, you've returned, but look at what you have done. You have killed our son." And Shiva said, "Our son?" And Parvati said, "Yes. While you were gone, I made a son, and you have killed him." And Shiva said, No, I don't think I've done that. He's our son. He is a god. He can never die. Yeah, I've removed his head, but that's okay. He doesn't need to have a head. He can be a god and not have a head. He doesn't even need to have a body, for that matter. This shows you how Shiva thinks. He is a god of formlessness. Things don't really need to have forms. It is their essence that is real. And Ganesh, his son, was a god. And so Shiva wasn't really too worried that he had no head. But Parvati, the goddess of nature, she said, "Now Shiva, my husband, understand. I am the goddess of nature, and as such, I understand reality in this way. Things need a form. Trees have leaves, branches, bark. Animals have fur, claws, or feathers. Birds have feathers and wings, and everything has a form. Our child needs a head. Shiva, give him back his head." And Shiva said, "Well, Parvati, the boy's standing up now. He doesn't have a head, but as you can see, he's alive. But, well, I cannot give him back his head. As a god, I cannot undo what I have done, but I'll find him another head. I'll find him another head and I'll replace it. That's what I can do." And so Shiva turned and he went back down the mountain. Presently he came upon an elephant sleeping in the grass. Shiva stood over the elephant and he said, "Elephant, how would you like to give your head to a god?" And the elephant said, "Yes, then I would become part of the god. Yes, take my head, Shiva." And so Shiva, he took the elephant's head. He carried it back up the mountain and he placed it between the shoulders of Ganesh. And that is how Ganesh got his elephant's head. It's the form of a god with the body of a boy and the head of an elephant. And as such, Ganesh becomes the god of wisdom, of writing. He can write as fast as thought. He helps people. He looks strange. He doesn't mind if people laugh at him when they first see him. For matching his father's austerity is Ganesh's humility. Ganesh doesn't mind if people laugh at him. He knows he looks strange, but he also knows he's rather beautiful in his own way. So that's a little bit about Ganesh. I think I need to bring this talk now to a close at this point. We've covered a little bit of our themes. Maybe not in the way that I might have first imagined it to be. Nevertheless, it gives us food for thought, and that's what we're after now, just food for thought. So I offer these words to you, these images, these archetypal essences, and offer it in play, really. But take them as you will and let them grow and swirl in your mind, dragon-like, where they will bring out new forms of being and new ideas to inspire us, because that is the purpose of art, to inspire. So at this point, I must thank you for your heroic listening, and I must say to you, so long for now, and I'll have more stories for you and more reveries for you later on this road that we walk. So thank you for your heroic listening, and so long for now.